and gentlemen, and thanks to the Maritime Centre for inviting APM Terminals to this function. Just so that those of you who don't know who APM Terminals are, we are a port operator. We currently operate 64 ports globally, with another 3 coming in the pipeline, and we are part of the AP Moller Maersk Group. What I will talk to you a little bit about today is more of the operational perspective, and we'll demonstrate that we are indeed walking the talk, but there are practical challenges that have to be addressed. So just to give you an indication, we operate plus or minus 100 to 120,000 units. That's machinery, big diesel-powered, usually lifting equipment. These are ship-to-shore gantries, they're rubber-tired gantries, terminal tractors, straddle carriers, and reach stackers. And that's the equipment that you need to move boxes in and around a port facility. To put that into perspective, our annual emissions is roughly 10 to 15 million tons of CO2. So the fundamental question is, what are we doing about it? So I will talk to you about what APMT or APM Terminals is doing on a global level, and then I'll talk a little bit about a case study, what we are piloting in Bahrain, because I'm the MD of the Bahrain terminal. So globally, APM Terminals aims to achieve 70% emissions reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2040. That's a pledge to ourselves, and it's also a pledge to our customers. The decarbonisation of energy supply is our top short-term priority. We are committed to the SBTi's target of sourcing 100% renewable electricity by 2030. And today we are already sourcing 40% of all the electricity we consume globally from renewable sources. That's a nearly 4-fold increase from 11% in 2020. How are we doing that today? Well, in practical terms, today we are effectively entering into purchasing renewable energy from directly from utility providers on long-term PPAs. Typically, these are 10-year PPAs, and Europe is in this case leading the field. So our decarbonisation efforts at APM Terminals have 3 fundamental pillars. To reduce, and that is reducing the consumption. In that case, what we focus on is efficiency gains. You've heard that a number of times, and particularly from the airline industry. But with so many moving parts, so many moving machinery, you've got to look at reducing your consumption level. And typically what we do is looking at process standardization, which is no mean feat when you're talking about 64, 67, 68 terminals globally. It's not an easy task. But the focus is on driving efficiencies of the usage of that equipment. Then we talk about replace, and that's replacing diesel equipment with electrification, whether it be electrification on the motor of the lifting equipment, but also we talk about sometimes propulsion as well, where we are controlling the maritime movements in port, so the tugs, the pilot vessels, etc. And then, of course, the fundamental point is that we have to decarbonize, and that is switching from the existing power producers, and it's looking at PPAs with renewable energy providers, or doing something on a self-sufficient basis that I will reflect in the case study. And then part of that is to as you start to replace equipment, you can then increase the penetration of asset digitization, and your equipment starts to get a lot smarter. And today, we still run in many cases slightly older equipment on diesel, and what we want to do is digitize those assets, and then you can start generating real-time data to then provide for additional efficiencies. So in terms of the Bahrain case study specific, we have a decarbonisation roadmap specifically for our facility there. And our solar project, which is a rooftop solar project, where we use our warehouses, we will then put solar panels on the top of the warehouses. We'll generate about 11.4 megawatts of power that way, but it will directly support Bahrain's sustainability vision as laid out in their Economic Vision 2030, which calls for a national renewable energy target of 5% by 2025 and 10% by 2035. What this will mean for us, we will be the first 100% electrically self-sufficient terminal by mid-2024, and it will reduce the terminal's footprint by 65%, and that's well ahead of the 2030 vision. But there are some challenges, and I mentioned that earlier, and I think that we must be all aware of what these challenges are. And we're specifically talking about the electrification of container handling equipment. And the challenges that we face today are the battery cost, and it's the equipment price premiums that we are having to pay for either dual fuel or fully electrified equipment. It's the charging infrastructure physically available within your terminal, and if it isn't available in your terminal, you have to invest in that charging infrastructure. No different from those who own an electric car. They need to install charging points in their home or in their office. But we have to do the same thing, but on a much larger scale within the terminal itself. It's the conversion factor. So you've got to run certain equipment to the end of its useful life, and then you start to replace it with electrified vehicles or machinery, and that takes time. But in addition to that, you have the issue that a number of us face today, those who are involved in the purchase, the rental of major plant or plant hire or equipment, and we talked about it earlier in the aircraft industry where they're talking about the availability of spare parts. It's the low production capacity from the OEMs and the lead times that are required to deliver on the lifting equipment. Sometimes it's 12 months, 18 months before you actually take physical delivery of some of that equipment. And then there's the lack of streamlining and standardization and modularization from the OEMs. There's still a lot of disparity between the technical capabilities of the equipment that's available on the market. And that also has to be standardized and modularized in due course. So 3 key messages from APM Terminals that we have for our partners and our suppliers. So fundamentally, number 1, think big. A mega trend like this calls for radical and not incremental innovation. The second point, the tipping points are on the horizon. Battery electric will become cheaper to own and operate than diesel. It's a matter of when and not if. And lastly, streamline, standardize, and modularize, and everyone has a role to play in that process. That's it from me. Thanks very much.